All right, I'm going to rip through the last demo. This is the CloudRun demo. I'll give a little plug to Roman on my team. There's a blog up on our site on CloudRun. This is the GKE version of CloudRun. It's a tutorial on how you can actually set CloudRun up. You can deploy our weather app and you can throw some load at it and watch it scale up and down process. So it's there's a video in this. So if you actually want to go through and try it yourself, just off a GCP account, you can. I mentioned earlier we've been working with the Google engineering team for a while. So one of the cool things is we get access to all the new stuff really early. So CloudRun is now working on GKE on-prem as of about a week and a half ago or so. So we were able to get access to the deployment and be able to give it a try and kick the tires with it. So it really is very close to the experience we get with the CloudRun in cloud. Some of the differences, we've been working to figure out a better mechanism to do the pub sub trigger. So I guess I'll explain CloudRun to start out. So I mentioned a Knative project that's going on. It's an open source project. Google's a big part of it. Red Hat's a big part of it. Pivotal's doing a lot of work. IBM. So it really is a true open source project in a sense that it's not just driven by one company. It's really an effort with a lot of major manufacturers or cloud companies producing software. The core bits of it is much of the Istio stuff you saw. So I'm going to show you some traffic shaping, some A/B deployments. Knative is really, I describe it as like the developer experience for Kubernetes. So it has a lot of intelligent defaults. So think of it as you have a Git repo, you have some code in there. You can very easily integrate Cloud Build. So you can go ahead and build a container, put it into a container registry, and then just run it for me. So create me an endpoint. Some of the other features it would have is scale to zero capability. So that's the serverless piece you hear about. I mean, there's still a container running behind the scenes here, obviously. But one of the things I'll show is when you stop hitting the endpoint, the pods scale down to zero. And then when you receive another HTTP request or an API call, you'll see the pods automatically scale up. And then when you throw more load at it, you'll see the pods scale up and down. Obviously, the scale to zero time is dependent on how big your container image is. So if you have really big container images, it's going to take a little while to scale up. But I see the use case for these kind of things as you have a bunch of API services that are part of your application. Maybe one of them does a store lookup for you. So why are you running that infrastructure if no one's on your site doing a store lookup? And when someone makes that API call for the store lookup, then the infrastructure or the pod can spin up and respond back. So there's an enormous amount of use cases that would help. Obviously, in cloud, you're going to pay for the infrastructure that you're using. So if you're not using anything, then you're not paying for it. So that's the nice part to scale to zero. You also get auto scaling capabilities. As more load comes into your site, you'll be able to scale the pods up and handle more distribution. So this is on my on-prem cluster, similar to what Tim's been showing. This is an on-prem GKE cluster. I'm going to go through the install. You'll see how easy it actually is to set up CloudRun and be able to deploy an application. One of the nice parts is Tim gave me this cluster, and he did a lot of work to get our back controls set up off of my G Suite account. So instead of what usually happens is someone hands me a kubeconfig file where I have admin and now I can break lots of stuff and cause problems. He's really just given me access to my user cluster, and then it can control the namespaces and the commands I can run, and he can revoke access that way too. The old days of passing around SSH keys have turned into the days of passing around kubeconfigs, and this is a good way to kind of get rid of that. So in this case, we're just using a little utility, Dexter utility. So I just install the utility and run it, and then it's going to automatically pop up and get me to authenticate with my my Arctiq G Suite account. And now you'll be able to see I can log into my cluster right away and start to look at the pods. So this is our famous beer Giphy app that we'll save for another event. And you can see in this case, I've got a 5-node cluster. This happens to be, I think this is just before GA. This was the 1.4 release of the beta release. Really, all I had to do here, as you can see, I'm cloning my repo. So I have all my config up in Git. And I'm going to pull down the repo. And then I'm going to be able to essentially start to deploy the pieces that I need to. So I've got a couple YAML files. You can see here's the namespaces that we have. We don't have, you'll shortly see a Knative namespace come up in here to do serving. Really, all I have to do is deploy these two YAML files, which is going to light up all the endpoint stuff, all the Istio config, all the serving pieces that you need to leverage to Knative and CloudRun. This is being moved into an operator really shortly. Right now it's a YAML config, but it'll be moved into an operator, I think, in a number of weeks. So you can see we've got the Knative serving namespace now. So that's where everything's going to happen. We've deployed our Istio gateway. it's all been configured and ready to go. And you can see inside of that namespace, we've got our autoscale pod controller, networking, there's a webhook, an activator. These are all the components that got deployed. So this is me deploying a Hello World application simply just through a YAML config. And you can see we've got it up and running in a very short period of time. It's being served by Envoy and Istio on the front side. And you can see we've got our Hello Go sample v1 application up and running. And that is our, in this case, where Tim was coming in through public IP addresses, we're leveraging private IP. You saw a 10 space. The Istio Envoy side is listening. It's hitting the F5 load balancer, and then it's coming in. So nothing's exposed through the internet in this case. So we're going to go ahead and deploy our Arctiq weather app. We're just going to do that through a YAML file. And you can see it's up and running, or it's coming up. We've got 0 pods up. We're creating the containers. And then in this case, you can customize the URL structure, obviously, what happens to be default. So if I create an application, I'm going to automatically get an endpoint. So you can see it's just Arctiq-weather and map, and then our endpoint. I happen to be using just cloudrunrocks.com internally, and it's configured in a local DNS configuration. So in this case, our app's up. You can see it's got the purple background. We'll look up the weather in Toronto. It automatically grabs the background of Toronto and populates that. And in this case, you can see we got 2 pods running because we just hit the endpoint. In this case, this is the entire YAML configuration for the entire application. So there is a image sitting in GCR that we pull. In this case, I'm just going to go swap out the image. This would be the most rudimentary way to swap out your application change. So we've already got an image built that has a different background, and we just go ahead and reapply the YAML config. You'll see we're going to automatically create a couple containers. And if we refresh the application, once that comes up, you're going to see it changes. We can go ahead and look up the weather again. So we just apply the same file. It's automatically going to pull the new image and spin the new container. We've got 2 of them running. And when we refresh, we should get an update to the application. So one of the interesting cases with this is when I was actually troubleshooting this is I was looking at my pods and I didn't have any pods up. They kept disappearing. And I was thinking they might have been in the wrong namespace or something, but it was the mechanism of scaling to 0. At 30 seconds, it will scale all the pods back down if there's no HTTP requests coming into them. So we flipped it over to green, and you can see we're killing 1 pod, bringing up the next one. So this is a kind of a rudimentary way to do blue-green testing. It's a little bit brute force. We're just calling a new file. In this case, we'll show you some of the Istio pieces where we can start to traffic shape. This is all driven from a webhook in this case. So in this example, we go into our repo. We're going to go into the style CSS file, and we're just going to swap out the background in this case. And what this is going to do is it's going to automatically cause a cloud build to happen. So it's going to build a brand new container. It's going to put it into GCR. And then it's going to send a event to have the application respawn. So we don't have to manually run the YAML config that I showed you earlier. So this is a case where you'd be referencing the exact same container image, maybe off a tag or something like that, like latest. This is where it would pull latest now and put the new application out. This is obviously assuming, you can see this is integrated into GCP, and we're leveraging cloud build for this. And then you'll see in a minute, it'll stick it into the registry. So this is assuming that we trust that our pipeline works and our new application is going to work. The next use case I'll show you is where we start to do 50% traffic on one part of the application. And then when we're happy with it, we can go back to 100%. More of a blue-green scenario. So you can see we've got our latest image up in there. It's set for 100% traffic. And if we refresh the app, check out Miami this time, and you can see we got back to blue. So this is, again, this is the entire config file for this use case. In this case, we're going to use a different application, and we're going to have a V1 setting that's blue and a V2 that's green, and we're able to flip back and forth between them. So we'll just apply this configuration. It'll go ahead and deploy the application. You can see that's how we reference our pod. In this case, we just got 100% traffic going to one part of our application. So that's us creating the endpoint and the route. We can look up what it is. So it's going to be blue-green demo. And then we've got our app v1. So this is our version 1 of our application. In the next case, we're going to deploy a version 2 of the application. We're actually going to give it an additional URL. So you could start to hit it to validate that it's working with a v2 flag on the URL structure. And none of this is all deployed automatically. You don't have to go and configure the load balance or anything like that. So that's the second version of our application there. You can see it's we inserted the second app endpoint. We're still sending 100% of traffic to the blue version. And then we apply our configuration. So this could be also done through config management, like we mentioned earlier, through a pull request. You get it approved to master, it automatically pushes this. I see a lot of use cases for custom Istio configurations for development teams to manage them through more of a GitOps workflow and do traffic shaping. This would be a great tool for QA departments to be able to validate stuff's ready to go to production. Now, if we look at our pods here, you'll see there'll be we've got one running. There's our new endpoint. And then there's our second version of our application. So in this case, we'll switch to more of a 50-50 traffic. So this is some of the pieces we're leveraging Istio for. So we're going to, similar to what Tim was doing, we're going to say send 50% of traffic to each of those sites. So use cases for this, I hear a lot are if you're an online retail customer or you're a marketing company, you may want to test out putting an ad in a different part of the website to see if you get more clicks that way. So this is a way you can slowly roll out maybe half the traffic and then start to look at the telemetry and the metrics. But you could also start to say, well, people who hit my website from the US, give them this type of ad. People who hit it from Europe, give them this type of use case, and then start to measure it. So it's a good way to inject change in and then measure it. And all you're really doing is adjusting a simple configuration file to steer traffic. So we've pushed that configuration. Now we should get 50-50 across both. Well, we refresh the application a couple times. You'll see it'll go back from V1 to V2. And you can kind of measure, are you getting the results you need with your new release? Is it performing the way it should? And then when it does, again, we're changing this manually and just rerunning the file. But I think the way to integrate this into your operations would be do this through a pull request, get it approved, and then it automatically will get pushed out through the environments, and you can start to measure that. And we should put 100% traffic back now. So you'll see everything's on V1 again. In this case, this is where you can see we've got a V2 flag here. So this is a way that you can deploy the application, but you can validate it through a different URL. So you're going to test it through a different URL for a while, make sure it works, and then you can go ahead and start shaping traffic over to it. So again, same YAML config, very simple. We'll apply it back to 100% the other way. We're back to green, and then you can see we can also validate that the endpoint's still up. So that's a little view of what you can do with CloudRun. It's this makes things fairly simple because you don't have to deal with long, complicated YAML files. You're just really saying, like, here's my code, build it, put my container image into a registry, and then run it. One of the nice parts that I like about what Google's doing with CloudRun and when you call it serverless is a lot of the serverless engines, even App Engine, you don't have a lot of knobs to twist. You get to put your service in there and it runs similar to like Lambda functions or something. This being Kubernetes and Istio underneath the covers, if you don't want to twist a lot of knobs, you don't have to. But if you really want to dig deep and start to customize every bit of it, you have the ability to do that. So you can start with like a base config and then get more sophisticated as time goes on. So keep an eye out for CloudRun. Like I said, we have a blog up. If you want to go try it out and just learn how it works, you can use GCP, a free account if you want. And then you'll see it come to Anthos and be able to be deployed on-prem very soon. So I think that's it for today. We went through obviously a lot of demos. Thanks for everyone for sticking around. Since we're in the YouTube room, this was really easy to record this session. So we'll post it up probably in the next week or so, and feel free to share it with coworkers and stuff like that. And a bunch of us will be around if you guys have any questions, and keep an eye out for some more events like this. So thanks for coming.